Once upon a time, there lived a woman who vowed to marry from a very wealthy family. Her name was Chinwe, and she only dated men who she believed were extremely rich. Not just rich, but filthy rich. Chinwe made it a duty never to date a man who came from a poor family. She didn't care if he was rich or not, because she believed that men of this caliber had so much responsibilities on their hands and would end up being poor in the nearest future. She wanted a man whose family had generational wealth, capable of satisfying up to their fourth generation. Chinwe craved this level of luxury and was not willing to compromise for anything in the world. How can a whole me end up with a poor wretched pauper? She said to her friend Uju, who laughed and reminded her that her family was poor. There is nothing wrong with being poor. After all, your family is poor, Uju said to Chinwe, who reminded her that her mentality was the reason why she was married to a poor and wretched man. A man that has no money to buy an abandoned car. Talk more of a new one. How do you feel living with a man who you feed at times with your little salary? He works for a rich man, yet he lives like a beggar. Why can't he steal from his boss and take care of you? He is forming holier than thou, yet he has nothing to show for it. If not that we have been friends since we were kids, I won't be caught dead, breathing the same air as you, Chinwe said to Uju, who felt offended by her words. At least, I'm not ashamed of my family, Uju replied Chinwe angrily as she advised her to change her ways. You can't continue to borrow money from people to fund your lifestyle. This house you are living in is not even your own. So, why are you acting all high and mighty when you are as poor as myself? She said to Chinwe as she angrily picked up her bags and left the house. Chinwe stood there as she reflected on what Uju had just said. Her mother was a poor market woman in the village, and Chinwe had done everything to disassociate herself from her poor family. She warned them never to come to the city because she could not stand people finding out that her family was poor. To those around, Chinwe was the daughter of a very wealthy man who lived abroad with the rest of her family. She borrowed money from several people just to be able to afford her rent. The car she drove belonged to a married man who she slept with whenever she needed a car. He owned a car dealership in town, and Chinwe only kept him because of the cars that she got from him. Chinwe lived a life full of lies, hoping to attract a wealthy man who would take her out of the life that she so desperately despised. Every detail of her life was carefully curated. Her clothes were rented and her jewelries borrowed. Chinwe believed that if she pretended long enough, she would eventually find herself in the arms of a wealthy man who would fall for her carefully crafted facade. One evening, whilst Chinwe was returning home from work, she received a call about an exclusive party that was slated for the weekend. It was strictly by invitation, and Chinwe knew that she had to be there. She quickly made enquiries about the invitation and was told to pay a huge sum of money for it. However, Chinwe had no such money in her account. She tried borrowing from a couple of friends who refused to lend her any money, owing to the fact that she owed them huge sums already. Chinwe had to be at this party and was willing to do anything to attend. With no money at hand, she began to think of what to do. In that moment, Chinwe received a call from her brother in the village that their family house had just flooded. Chinwe thought of an idea to raise the money, so the next morning, she set out to the village, hoping to actualize her plans. When she arrived at the village, she met her old mother who had just returned from the farm. Chinwe pretended to be saddened by the recent flooding. She convinced her mother and brother to hand over their family land documents to her for safekeeping, citing the recent flooding. Chinwe promised to keep the documents safe in the city, and her mother, being so old and naive, handed the documents over to her, trusting that she would keep it safe. What she did not know was that Chinwe had other plans for the documents. She planned on using it to secure her place at the party. Chinwe was so delighted that her plan worked. She returned to the city and began to make plans for the party. She approached her friend Gina to borrow her some wigs and clothes, promising to return them after the party. Chinwe could not risk anything going wrong at this point. After all the money that she had spent on the evening of the party, Chinwe arrived at the venue like royalty. She looked extremely beautiful, and the men could not help but stare. Heads turned as she entered the venue, her confidence radiating like the morning sun. Chinwe carefully scanned the room, dismissing the married men who seemed to approach her. Her eyes finally settled on a man who stood quietly by the bar. He was tall, strikingly handsome, and dressed in an impeccable tailored suit. His name was Tobe, and he was the heir of one of the wealthiest families in the country who recently returned from living abroad. Determined to catch his attention, Chinwe put her charm into overdrive. She approached him and introduced herself to him as the daughter of a very wealthy man who lives in the UK. Chinwe made up several convincing stories to prove to Toby that she was rich. She even went as far as faking a phone call to her supposed father, effortlessly painting a picture of a privileged woman whose family owned estates overseas. Toby seemed intrigued by her story but remained cautious, speaking little about himself as he allowed Chinwe to do all the talking. However, as the night wore on, cracks began to form in her facade. Tobe was no fool. He noticed inconsistencies in her stories and grew suspicious when Chinwe failed to answer certain questions about her supposed family business. Just as they stood there talking, a young woman walked in and took him from her. Chinwe could not believe her eyes. She watched as Tobe gently walked off with the woman who turned out to be his girlfriend. She was so furious to see him with another woman. Chinwe had invested so much into this party and was not willing to back down now. She made up her mind to marry Tobe even if it was the last thing that she did. Filled with so much anger, Chinwe sat in the corner alone as she drank up her glass of champagne. A waiter, who seemed to be serving drinks at the event, caught sight of her and decided to ask for her number. Chinwe could not believe her eyes. She looked up at him, disgust written all over her face as she asked if he was mad. "You must be mentally deranged to think that a woman like me would ever stoop so low to talk to a pauper like yourself." Chinwe spat, her voice dripping with disdain as she asked him a question that he never saw coming. "Do you know who I am? Do you have any idea how far beneath me that you are?" "A common waiter. It's your audacity for me," she said as she warned him never to come close to her again. Days passed and Chinwe strategized on how to win Tobe's love. He was her only ticket out of poverty, and Chinwe was willing to do anything to have him. She stalked his every movement, visiting places she believed he loved. Chinwe even went as far as attending his church just to be in his presence. She made herself noticeable, dressing in the finest clothes and sitting strategically where Tobe would always see her. However, none of her efforts seemed to catch his attention. Tobe was so devoted to his girlfriend Ndidi. He loved her so much, and Chinwe became frustrated by their relationship. Unable to bear the frustration any longer, Chinwe decided to do something about it. She hired a private investigator to dig into her background, hoping to uncover a scandal that would lead to the end of their relationship. After weeks of searching, the investigator returned with little to no dirt on Ndidi. She was a well-respected woman with a clean reputation, but Chinwe was not willing to give up just yet. She decided to plant dirt on Ndidi since there wasn't dirt on her already. Chinwe was willing to play dirty. She could not risk to be with another woman and knew that she had to do something about it. Just as she stood there contemplating on what to do, Chinwe decided to plant false messages, using a second phone to text Tobe anonymously, claiming to be someone who had evidence of his girlfriend's infidelity. Tobe was initially skeptical. He began to feel a pang of doubt, which was finally crushed by some doctored images showing Ndidi in the arms of another man. Tobe confronted Ndidi with the photos, but Ndidi denied the accusations vehemently. He loved Ndidi so much, but couldn't ignore the mounting evidence that Chinwe had fabricated. Their once loving relationship grew strained, and eventually Tobe decided to take a break to clear his head. Chinwe was so delighted at this. She saw this as her opportunity to finally win him over. So, she began to spend more time with him, inserting herself into his life under the guise of comforting him. Chinwe brought cooked meals for him, planned outings, and showered him with so much attention. Yet, despite her efforts, Tobe remained distant. He was polite but never reciprocated her affections, and Chinwe grew frustrated by this. One evening, while at Tobe's house, Chinwe leaned in and confessed her feelings to him. Tobe, sensing her desperation, pushed her away and warned her never to try this with him again. But Chinwe was relentless. She forced a kiss on him, hoping to stir some form of emotions. Tobe stepped back from her, his face filled with disgust and disdain, but Chinwe refused to give up. She confessed her feelings to him again, saying that his girlfriend Ndidi did not deserve him. Tobe ignored her completely, but his suspicions of her began to grow. One afternoon, Chinwe's mother arrived to Tobe's house in search of her daughter. She had come to the city in search of Chinwe because a group of strangers paid a visit to their village, claiming ownership of their family land. Chinwe's mother was so desperate to retrieve the land documents. She arrived Chinwe's house and was told that Chinwe was currently at Tobe's house. Chinwe could not believe her eyes. She caught sight of her mother at the gate and rushed out to meet with her. "Why are you here, Mama? Do you want to ruin everything that I've worked so hard to build?" she asked her mother, who went on to ask about the land documents. Chinwe, on hearing this, flared up in anger. She dragged her mother to the back of the house, away from prying eyes, and began to yell angrily at her. "You're nothing but a poor wretched woman," she hissed. "Do you know how much I've sacrificed? You can't ruin this for me." Before her mother could respond, Chinwe shoved her mother into the trunk of her car. "Stay there until I'm done," she ordered as she walked back into the house, hoping that Tobe didn't hear the altercation. She met Tobe preparing to head out for a meeting, and Chinwe informed him that she had to go. She got into her car and drove out of the premises with her mother carefully tucked away in the trunk of the car. Chinwe could not risk anyone finding out that her mother was poor. They arrived home and Chinwe chastised her mother for what she did, revealing that she had to return to the village immediately. "You can't stay here, Mama," she said as she informed her that they had to leave for the car park immediately. Chinwe's mother did all she could to retrieve the land documents, but Chinwe blatantly refused to return them. She dismissed her mother's pleas, assuring her that the documents were safe with her. Heartbroken and defeated, her mother boarded the bus back to the village in silence. She could not believe that her daughter would send her back to the village by that time of the day. Her heart was so heavy with worry, knowing that something was definitely wrong. Later that evening, her best friend Uju came visiting and met Chinwe fuming in anger. She asked what the problem was, and Chinwe narrated how her mother almost ruined things for her at Tobe's house. Uju could not believe her ears. She could not believe that Chinwe made her mother ride in the trunk of her car because of a man. How wicked could you be to treat your old mother in such a way? She asked Chinwe, who dismissed her concerns as unnecessary. "Didn't I tell her never to visit me in the city? What was she expecting me to do? Choose her poor wretched self over my rich and handsome Prince Charming?" she asked Uju, who shook her head in disappointment as she spoke. "Chinwe, do you hear yourself? This man you are chasing, what has he done to earn this level of loyalty from you? And your mother, your own mother, what has she done to deserve this level of cruelty from you?" Chinwe glared at her friend. "You won't understand, Uju. I have sacrificed too much to let anything or anyone, even my own mother, ruin my plans. If you can't support me, you know where the door is, she said to Uju, who was now visibly disgusted. One day, Chinwe, you will look back on all this and regret it. You can't build a life based on lies and wickedness. Mark my words, your actions will come back to haunt you one day. With that, Uju stormed out of the house, leaving Chinwe alone with her thoughts. The next evening, Chinwe arrived to Bei's house, dressed in one of the beautiful dresses that she had rented. She saw the smile on Tobei's face when he caught sight of her and knew that she had finally won him to herself. They sat at the table for dinner and Tobei could not take his eyes off her. Chinwe could feel her heart race as Tobei asked her to be his woman. She could not believe her ears. Her plans of finally being with a wealthy man was now becoming a reality. Chinwe basked in the luxurious life that Tobei had provided for her. She moved into his mansion, attended exclusive events, and enjoyed the admiration of her peers. Chinwe proudly flaunted her relationship with Tobei, feeling as though she had finally secured the life that she had always dreamed of. One evening, Tobei introduced her to his family as the woman that he planned on marrying. Chinwe could not contain her excitement. She sat there, imagining what her life would be when she finally becomes his wife. All the luxury that she stood to gain made her stomach flutter as Chinwe watched his family accept her as one of their own. She sat there in awe as Tobei announced to his family his plans of hosting a grand engagement party to celebrate their love. Chinwe was so ecstatic. She imagined the glamorous event, picturing herself in an expensive dress, surrounded by the elite of the society. This was her moment, and Chinwe made up her mind to make a statement. Tobei made all the arrangements himself, and Chinwe was so delighted to have a man who treated her like a queen. Her friend Uju heard about the engagement and called to congratulate her. She hoped that Chinwe would invite her for the event, but Chinwe revealed to Uju that the event was not for poor people. Only the rich can attend, she said to Uju, who could not believe her ears. She hung up the phone, and Chinwe's words continued to echo in her mind. Uju broke down in tears, regretting all the sacrifices that she made for Chinwe in the past. She remembered how she used all the money she had saved to bring Chinwe out of the village to the city. Uju remembered how she shared her little apartment with Chinwe and gave her money for food and even helped her take care of her father's burial bills. Uju could not believe that the same person that she had sacrificed so much for had now turned her back on her. She shook her head in disappointment, vowing never to associate with Chinwe again. Just as she sat there, her husband returned home, looking so excited. The man he had worked for almost 12 years died and left a substantial portion of his wealth to him. Uju stared at her husband in disbelief. Her husband smiled at her as he held out a letter in his hands. Uju quickly took the letter from him and began to read its content. It turned out that Mr. Olamide, the man who her husband worked for, died and left a will. In it were instructions giving her husband access to a mansion, some landed properties and billions of naira. Uju's hand trembled as she read the contents of the letter. She could not hold back her tears, realizing that their sufferings were finally over. Fate had finally smiled down at her at a time when she least expected it, at a time when she was being mocked by her best friend for being poor. Meanwhile, Chinwe basked in the euphoria of her newfound status. She talked down on anyone who she believed she was better than and even began to beat up her mates unprovoked. Chinwe could not hide her disdain for poor people and showed it at every opportunity. The day of the engagement finally arrived, and it was everything Chinwe had imagined and more. The venue was lavishly decorated, the food exquisite, and the guest list filled with prominent figures. Chinwe walked into the venue wearing a dazzling dress that Tobei had picked out for her, her head held high as she basked in the admiration of everyone that was present. Chinwe felt like royalty in that moment. Tobe's family were all present, and Chinwe reveled in the attention that she was getting. Her heart swelled with pride as she imagined herself becoming a part of this powerful circle. The ceremony finally began, and Tobe took the microphone to speak to the guests. He thanked everyone for coming and spoke about how much he loved and valued her. Chinwe beamed with joy as she watched Tobe shower her with praises in front of the crowd. He gestured toward a large screen behind him, which he said was a special gift to Chinwe. The lights dimmed as the video began to play for all to see. Chinwe sat in shock as she watched herself in the middle of the busy market, arguing over the price of second-hand clothes. She wore a tattered dress and a scarf that barely covered her hair. The crowd murmured in shock as they watched Chinwe's true background unfold before their eyes. Chinwe froze. Her heart pounded as she realized the magnitude of what had just happened. She turned to Tobe, who ignored her completely as the next clip began to play. Chinwe saw herself yelling at her mother as she shoved her into the trunk of her car. The final blow came when Tobe invited Chinwe's mother and brother on the stage. Chinwe's mother, who was frail and old, clutched her son's arm as they approached. The entire room fell silent as Tobe addressed Chinwe's mother in front of the crowd. "Mama, I invited you here because I believe you deserve to be honored, not hidden away in shame." Tobe honored her in front of the crowd, promising to care for all of her needs. He then turned to Chinwe, who stood there paralyzed and unable to speak. "You thought you could fool me easily," he said, revealing that he knew who she was from the start. "You lied, manipulated, and betrayed everyone, including your own family. I wanted to show you that no matter how high you climb, the truth will always bring you down," he said to Chinwe, who watched as Ndidi strolled into the hall in an extremely beautiful dress. "You thought you were so smart to break us apart. What you did not know was that Ndidi and I were always 10 steps ahead of you," Tobe said with a smirk on his face as Ndidi joined him on stage. Chinwe's world shattered in that moment as Ndidi's presence confirmed that she was nothing but a pawn in their own game. "We knew about your schemes, Chinwe," Ndidi began, her voice calm but cutting. "Every lie you told, every cruel act you committed was recorded to show the world who you truly were." Chinwe's knees buckled as she tried to hold herself up for much longer. Tears poured down her face as she looked at the people who once admired her, cast disgusting glances at her. Tobe turned to her, his voice laced with cold detachment. "You thought you could use lies and desperation to trap me, but I wanted to show you what true shame looks like. This engagement was never real. It was a stage for your own reckoning." Tobe gestured towards Ndidi and said, "This is the woman I will marry, a woman with integrity, grace, and honor." Chinwe, seeing that she had been defeated, tried to plead with Tobe to reconsider. "Tobe, please, I will change. I will do anything. Don't just leave me like this," she said to Tobe, who didn't even spare her a glance. He turned to the security and told them to escort her out of the venue, and Chinwe was dragged out of the grand hall like a thief. The once proud woman, who sought luxury at all costs, now stood alone as she watched her reputation come to ruins. Her seemingly perfect life had fallen apart before her eyes. Tobe took her mother and brother under his wing, ensuring that they were well taken care of. He honored them publicly and privately, solidifying his reputation as a man of integrity. Ndidi and Tobe's engagement became the true highlight of the evening, with blessings pouring in from family and friends. Meanwhile, her friend Uju began to live a fulfilling life with her husband. Their newfound wealth afforded them a life of luxury and comfort. Uju found peace knowing that she had always been humble and life rewarded her for it. Chinwe, on the other hand, became a cautionary tale. Her desperation for wealth and disregard for those who loved her left her with nothing but regret. She spent her days in solitude, haunted by the memories of what could have been if only she had valued the right things. And so, the woman who once vowed to marry into wealth learned too late that character, not lies, is what builds true riches. The lesson to be learned from this story is that true wealth lies not in material possessions but in integrity, humility, and love. No amount of riches can compensate for a lack of character, and no lie can sustain a false life forever. Chinwe's downfall was not her ambition, but her willingness to sacrifice her morals, family, and humanity for fleeting appearances and empty validation. In the end, the universe rewarded those who remained humble and true to themselves, like Uju and Ndidi, whilst punishing the arrogance and deceit of those who sought shortcuts to success. And so, Chinwe became a living reminder that a house built on lies will always crumble, but one built on truth, love, and hard work will stand the test of time. I hope you enjoyed the story.